The first thing my mom said when I rolled my suitcase into the house was, "Well, don't get too comfortable. You're just a guest here now." I laughed, thinking she was joking, but she wasn't. She had guest rules printed and taped to the fridge like a hotel check-in notice. My name was listed under temporary occupant. There was even a reminder that guests should not expect pantry access without permission. After everything, I'd just finished a brutal year of layoffs, downsizing, and losing my apartment. Being called a guest in the house I helped repaint as a kid hit harder than I expected. I wanted to keep the peace, but something in me snapped that day. If she wanted to treat me like a guest, then fine, I'd act like one. Guests, after all, don't do chores for free. They charge for their stay. That's how I ended up writing my own house invoice and turning family disrespect into a lesson in boundaries, fairness, and maybe a little bit of perfectly polite revenge. When I first moved back home, I told myself it was temporary, just 3 months while I transitioned between jobs. My company had gone through major layoffs, and even though I got a small severance, I needed time to get back on my feet. My mom's house was only a 30-minute drive from where I worked before, and she'd always said, "You'll always have a place here," so I took her up on it. But the tone changed fast. The moment I stepped through the door, I realized that the warm, familiar home I grew up in had turned into something else, almost like a mini boarding house. My mom had remarried a few years earlier to my stepdad, Carl, who's a kind man but avoids conflict like it's a sport. Their dynamic was orderly. Everything had a system, from laundry schedules to fridge labels. And now I was apparently a disruption to that order. The first morning back, I walked into the kitchen, bleary-eyed and grateful for the smell of coffee. But taped to the fridge was a laminated list titled Guest Expectations. It read, "Guests contribute $50 per week for shared utilities. Guests clean up immediately after themselves. Guests may not adjust the thermostat. Guests request fridge space in advance. Guests respect. Quiet hours, 9 p.m., 7 a.m. At first, I thought it was meant for other people, maybe visiting relatives or her book club friends who stayed over sometimes. But then I saw my initials written at the bottom, J temporary guest, max 90 days. I remember just standing there, toast halfway to my mouth, feeling that little sting behind my eyes that you get when you're embarrassed and angry at the same time. Later that day, I tried to talk to her about it. "Mom, you don't have to treat me like I'm renting a room from a stranger," I said carefully. She didn't even look up from her tablet. "Honey, it's not personal. We just have our routines now. You're an adult, and adults should have boundaries." Boundaries. That word echoed in my head all afternoon. Because yes, boundaries are healthy, but this didn't feel like boundaries. It felt like distance. Still, I told myself it was fine. I'd pay the $50 per week. I'd keep my things tidy. I'd stay out of the way. Then came the first incident. A few days later, I went to grab cereal from the pantry and noticed a padlock on the door. My mom had literally padlocked the pantry. When I asked about it, she said, "We've had problems with snacks going too quickly. And it keeps things fair." Fair. Right. Because clearly, I was the great cereal thief of the suburbs. Instead of arguing, I bought my own groceries and labeled them with a bright blue marker. Every container said J's. I even used a small cooler. In my room for milk and drinks, since the fridge was so full, it became clear that this wasn't going to be a peaceful stay. The hardest part wasn't the rules, it was the way she looked at me. Like I was an inconvenience. Like the kid who used to shovel snow off this driveway and fix her computer problems had suddenly become some kind of uninvited tenant. Carl, my stepdad, tried to stay neutral. He'd say things like, "You know how she gets about routines, and it's easier to just follow her system." But every night, I'd go to my little room, the same one I painted blue at 16, and wonder how things had gone so wrong between us. I reminded myself that this was temporary. 3 months, max. I could handle that. But as the days passed, I started noticing smaller things. The electricity bill taped to my door with a sticky note saying, "Guest portion due Friday." The Wi-Fi password suddenly changing with no notice. Her referring to me as the guest when she talked to neighbors. That's when the emotional stakes started to rise. It wasn't just about rules anymore. It was about respect. I realized that every time she called me just a guest, it chipped away at our relationship a little more. And even though I was trying to stay grateful, something deep down told me that if I didn't stand up for myself soon, this wouldn't just end with awkward tension, it might end with us not speaking at all, and that more than any rule sheet or bill was something I couldn't afford to lose. So I started keeping notes. Every expense, every errand I ran for her, every time I watched her dog when she and Carl went out. I didn't know it yet, but I was quietly gathering the receipts that would eventually turn this whole situation upside down. By the end of week 2, the guest treatment had gone from awkward to downright surreal. I'd expected some adjustments. After all, moving back into your childhood home as an adult can be weird. But this was something else. It started small. Every morning I'd find a new sticky note somewhere. Please rinse the sink after brushing your teeth. Or, guests don't use fabric. Softener, it's too expensive. My personal favorite was quiet hours. Start at 9. Please respect others. Sleep, which she placed on my door after hearing me laugh while watching a movie at 9:03. I wasn't a loud person. I worked remote part-time, cooked simple meals, and spent most evenings in my room with headphones. Still, it felt like every move I made came with commentary. Then came the chore chart. One Saturday morning, I found a color-coded grid on the fridge. The top read, Weekly Chores, Fairness for Everyone. Under Mom and Carl, there were neat columns. Grocery shopping, laundry, yard work. Under J, Guest, the list was 3 times longer. Dishes every night, trash duty, vacuuming, pet care, and guest bathroom maintenance. I stared at it for a good minute before calling out, Mom, can we talk about this list? She appeared in the kitchen, hands on hips. What about it? This seems a little uneven. Well, you're here more during the day. Carl and I both work full-time. It just makes sense that you help more. Sure, I said slowly. But I also pay weekly and buy my own food, she shrugged. That's the arrangement. Guests help out. Guests help out. It was her favorite phrase. Like she'd discovered a way to turn kindness into a transaction. That night, my cousin Mia stopped by for a quick visit. She's my age, funny, and has a no-nonsense way of cutting to the truth. As we sat in my room eating takeout, I told her everything about the locked pantry, the bills, the sticky notes. Mia frowned. Wait, she's charging you utilities but also locking the food? Yep, and calling you a guest? In your old room? Uh-huh. She leaned back and gave me that look. The one that says, you know this isn't okay, right? You need boundaries, not just patience, she said. If she wants to treat you like a tenant, you should treat her like a landlord. Keep records. Funny thing was, I already had. Every time I did grocery runs or helped with errands, I saved the receipts. I'd even started noting how often I fed or walked their golden retriever, Daisy, when they were gone for the weekend. At first, I did it to keep myself from going crazy. But now it felt like preparation. The next few weeks only reinforced that instinct. Groceries I bought disappeared from the fridge. Oh, I thought that yogurt was for everyone, Mom would say. She started referring to the guest bathroom when talking to her friends, which was just the hallway bathroom I'd cleaned since childhood. One afternoon, she reminded me not to hog the laundry because guests should use it only during off hours. Like I was in an Airbnb with a noise policy. Carl wasn't much help, though he tried. Your mom just likes structure, he said one evening when I caught him in the kitchen. She's proud of how organized the house is now. Carl, I'm fine following rules, I said. But she's acting like I'm a stranger, he sighed. She doesn't mean it that way. But maybe she's worried about you relying on her too much. You know how she is about independence. That comment stung more than I let on. Because I was trying to be independent. That's why I'd moved home temporarily, to rebuild, not to lean forever. But being treated like I was freeloading when I was actually contributing, that wasn't independence. It was humiliation dressed as discipline. Things came to a head one evening when I came home to find my name written on the thermostat in red marker. Guests do not change temperature. I'd turned it up 2 degrees earlier that morning because it was freezing, and apparently that was grounds for a household memo. That was the moment something in me clicked. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. Mia's words came back to me. If she treats you like a landlord, you respond like a tenant. I opened my laptop, created a spreadsheet titled Guest Contributions, and started filling it in. Groceries. Bought $78.42, electric bill paid, $50, dog care, 3 days. 6 hours gas for errands. 14 line by line, week by week, I documented everything. Because if my mom wanted to keep things formal, then I'd make it official. Little did I know, I'd get the perfect chance to use those records sooner than I thought, because the next family dinner would push me past my breaking point. It all came crashing down at what was supposed to be a pleasant Sunday family dinner. My mom had invited a few relatives over, my aunt, uncle, and 2 cousins, to celebrate family togetherness. The irony wasn't lost on me. I helped set the table. Even though I'd been on trash duty earlier that day and was already exhausted, Carl grilled chicken outside while Mom bustled around directing everyone. I was trying to keep things light, joking with my cousins, when Mom's voice cut through the chatter. "Jay, make sure you use the guest plate set, please. Those are for the main family." The room went quiet for a second. My aunt looked confused. "Guest plate set?" she repeated. Mom smiled, oblivious. "Oh, you know, since Jay's just staying for a few months, we keep separate dishes for everyone now. It keeps things organized." I could feel my face flush. My fork froze midair. Guest plate set. It wasn't the words alone, it was the tone. Cheerful, but with that underlying finality that said, "You're not one of us right now." My cousin Mia, sitting across the table, gave me a sympathetic look. My aunt tried to laugh it off. "You still live here, don't you?" Before I could answer, Mom chimed in again. "Well, technically, Jay's a guest. I think it's important for adults to have clear roles in the household." "Clear roles?" "Sure." I bit my tongue and focused on my food. I'd promised myself not to start anything, but then came the laundry fine. After dinner, Mom pulled me aside while people were still chatting in the living room. She held up a small slip of paper. It looked suspiciously like a receipt. "What's this?" I asked. "Your portion for the laundry detergent," she said, perfectly serious. "You've been doing more laundry lately and it's expensive." I blinked. "You're charging me for laundry soap now?" "Well, you use the machines and supplies." "It's only fair. Guests contribute to what they use." I couldn't even respond. I just walked away, feeling that tight, heavy sensation in my chest, the one that sits somewhere between anger and heartbreak. When I got to my room, I saw that my Amazon package had been opened and left on my bed. It wasn't a big deal, just a few t-shirts I'd ordered, but the tape was cut open neatly. I took a deep breath and went back to the kitchen. "Mom, did you open my package?" "Oh, yes," she said casually, rinsing dishes. "I thought it might be something for the house." "You really should use the family Amazon account next time. That was it. The last straw." I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just nodded and said quietly, "Okay, if I'm just a guest here, then I'll start acting like one." She looked puzzled. "What do you mean?" "You'll see," I said, and went back to my room. That night, I sat down with my laptop and opened the spreadsheet I'd been keeping. Every note, every expense, every errand. Then I added 2 new columns, date and purpose. Underneath the heading, I listed everything from the moment I moved in. Grocery runs for the household dog, sitting while they were away cleaning. Tasks beyond my assigned chores, utility overpayments even. The light bulbs I'd replaced when I totaled it. The number surprised me. Over $600 worth of contributions and unpaid. Tasks in less than 2 months. That wasn't counting the emotional labor of being treated like an outsider in my own home. As I reviewed the list, my feelings started to shift from hurt to calm determination. I wasn't doing this to punish anyone. I just wanted fairness. The same fairness my mom kept preaching. If I was a guest, then it was time to make it official. So I wrote a polite, professional letter, the kind you'd send to a landlord. It outlined all of my guest contributions and included an itemized invoice labeled Balance Owed or Agreement Pending. At the bottom, I added a note. Guests pay for their stay. Hosts compensate for services rendered. Please advise which role we're operating under so that I can plan accordingly. I printed it, sealed it in an envelope, and left it on the kitchen counter with her name on it. I didn't know what kind of storm I'd just set in motion. But for the first time in months, I slept peacefully that night. The next morning, I woke up to the faint clinking of dishes downstairs, my mom's thinking noise. Whenever she was irritated but didn't want to argue yet, she'd busy herself with an exaggerated kitchen cleanup. I took a deep breath, straightened my shirt, and walked into the kitchen. The envelope I'd left on the counter was open, its contents neatly stacked beside her coffee mug. She didn't look at me right away. "Morning," I said, keeping my tone even. "Morning," she replied curtly. Then, with a sigh, she added, "What exactly is this, Jay?" "That's my guest invoice," I said calmly. "You've made it clear that I'm not family here, so I thought we should keep things formal." She blinked at me, clearly thrown off. "An invoice? This is ridiculous, is it?" I asked gently. "Because I've been following the guest rules, paying my share, doing more chores than either of you, buying groceries for the house, watching Daisy, and covering small repairs. If I'm a guest, that's not part of the deal. Guests don't do housework for free." Carl walked in halfway through, holding his coffee, clearly sensing the tension. "What's going on?" "Your child," my mom said, waving the paper in the air, "thinks we owe them money for living here." I smiled politely. "Not money, Mom, clarity. Either I'm a contributing family member and we treat each other with mutual respect, or I'm a paying guest and we use a fair agreement. That's all I'm asking." Carl scratched his head. "Well, that's not unreasonable," he said slowly. "You've been helping out a lot." Mom turned on him. "You're siding with that?" He sighed. "I'm just saying maybe we should look at what Jay's asking for before we assume." I handed him the printed breakdown. Each line was itemized: grocery totals, gas for errands, shared utilities I'd covered, and a fair estimate for household help, at a modest hourly rate. The total wasn't meant to shock, it was meant to make a point. Carl's eyes widened slightly as he scanned the numbers. "Wow, this adds up," Mom crossed her arms. "This is absurd. You can't put a price tag on helping family." "Exactly," I said softly. "Family helps each other out, without locking pantries or sending detergent bills." That silenced the room. Even Daisy, their golden retriever, seemed to pause mid-tail wag. After a few seconds, I added, "I'm happy to keep paying rent if we can agree on a fair amount and stop treating me like a stranger. But if you want to keep things formal, if I'm truly a guest, then yes, that invoice stands. Guests get paid for the work they do." Mom didn't speak. She just looked at the paper again, her expression cycling from disbelief to frustration to something softer, maybe guilt. Carl finally broke the silence. "How about we all sit down tonight and figure this out properly?" I nodded. That's all I wanted. That evening, we sat around the dining table, the same one that had hosted so many birthdays and holidays before things got tense. I'd even invited Mia, who my mom respected for her level-headedness. Mia opened the conversation. "This doesn't have to be a fight. It's about fairness. Jay just wants clear expectations." Mom still looked defensive, but she listened. I explained that I wanted to continue contributing, just not under the guest label. I suggested a fair monthly rent that covered my share of utilities, without the emotional sting of being treated like an outsider. Then I proposed a simple written agreement. Rent. Flat rate each month, shared chores divided equally, access to the kitchen and common areas like any adult living there, mutual respect, no guest label, no passive-aggressive notes. It wasn't revenge. It was accountability wrapped in kindness. Mia read it over and nodded. "Seems more than reasonable." Carl agreed. "This would make things a lot smoother." Mom was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, "I didn't realize it felt that bad. I wanted to keep order. I thought I was helping you stay independent." I smiled. "I know, and I love you for that. But independence isn't the same as distance." She blinked hard, and for a second I thought she might cry. Instead, she exhaled, folded the paper, and said, "All right, let's start fresh." We all signed the new agreement, me, Mom, and Carl, right there at the table. No drama, no yelling. just a quiet reset. It was the first truly calm dinner we'd had in months, and as I looked around the table, seeing Mia's satisfied grin and Mom's softened expression, I realized something. Sometimes standing up for yourself doesn't mean burning bridges. It means teaching others how to meet you halfway. That night, I printed a fresh copy of the agreement and pinned it on the fridge, right where the guest rules used to hang. Only this time, everyone smiled when they saw it. The next few weeks after that meeting felt like living in an entirely different house. Gone were the sticky notes, the color-coded chore chart, and the word guest echoing through every conversation. For the first time since I'd unpacked my suitcase, the air in the house actually felt light again. Mom and I started finding our rhythm. She removed the padlock from the pantry, an actual physical symbol of how closed off we'd become, and even laughed about it one morning. "You know," she said, "I can't believe I ever thought that was normal." I smiled. "Progress," Carl chuckled from behind his newspaper. "You should have seen her last night, Jay. She almost made another rule list, then caught herself mid-thought. Hey!" Mom protested, but she was laughing too. That small bit of humor broke through weeks of tension. It didn't erase everything, but it softened the edges. The new agreement worked beautifully. I paid a fair rent amount, something reasonable but enough to help with utilities, and we all agreed to share groceries more openly. If one of us cooked, we cooked for everyone. If someone needed quiet, we communicated it directly instead of writing notes like we were in a passive-aggressive sitcom. It was amazing how clear. Boundaries turned chaos into calm. Even Daisy the dog seemed happier. No. More confusion about who would walk her. We actually started doing it together sometimes. Those quiet evening walks with my mom became a kind of therapy we didn't even realize we needed. One night, while we were out with Daisy, Mom broke the silence. "I read that invoice again," she said. "Oh?" I glanced at her. "You mean the one that nearly caused a small household revolution?" She laughed softly. "Yes, that one." "You were right, though." I was being unfair. I didn't realize how much I'd turned our home into, a system instead of a space for family. "It's easy to do," I said gently. "You were just trying to stay in control. But I think we both learned something about what control actually costs." She nodded. "I just didn't want you to feel stuck here. I thought being strict would help you move on faster." I looked at her. "Mom, sometimes the best way to help someone move forward is to make them feel supported, not tolerated." That hit home for both of us. She squeezed my shoulder and said quietly, "I'm sorry, Jay." I smiled. Apology accepted. From then on, we treated the house like what it was supposed to be. A shared home, not a hotel. 3 months turned into 4 while I saved enough to move into a small apartment nearby. The day I left, Mom helped me pack and even slipped a note into one of my boxes. When I unpacked it later, it read, "You'll always have a place here. No labels, no rules, just love. Mom." That single note meant more than any apology could have. Carl helped me move the heavier boxes and joked, "Next time, maybe charge us rent for all the emotional growth you've caused." We laughed. But in truth, I think we all came out ahead. The invoice I'd written, once a symbol of tension, became our family's inside joke. Whenever Mom tried to micromanage, Carl would tease, "Careful, or Jay's gonna start billing by the hour again." And she'd grin, roll her eyes, and say, "I deserve that." Over time, our relationship felt closer than it had in years. Not perfect, no family is, but honest, respectful, and that honesty made visits home feel warm again, not heavy. I didn't need to win anything in the end. I just needed my mom to understand that love and respect can't live in the same space as control and resentment. Sometimes, it takes a spreadsheet and a polite invoice to remind everyone that boundaries don't break families. They rebuild them. A few months later, when I hosted my first dinner in my new apartment, I invited Mom, Carl, and Mia. I cooked, set the table, and, just for fun, placed a printed guest rules sheet in front of Mom's seat. She burst out laughing the moment she saw it. "Touché, Jay. Very funny." I thought I'd keep the tradition alive, I said, but at the bottom of that sheet, I'd added one last line, "Rule number 1, Family is never just a guest. She read it out loud, smiled, and said, "That's one rule I can live with." We clinked glasses, and for the first time in a long while, everything felt right. Because when family finally learns to meet you halfway, the house becomes a home again, not through rules or rent, but through respect. Moving out wasn't the end of the story. It was the quiet beginning of something healthier. For the first time in years, my relationship with my mom didn't feel like walking through a minefield. It felt like a partnership, one built on understanding instead of obligation. Looking back now, I realized that the moment she called me just a guest was actually the turning point we both needed. It forced me to stand up for myself without being cruel, and it showed her how easy it is to mistake control for care. I used to think setting boundaries was selfish, that if I just kept saying yes, eventually people would notice and appreciate it. But boundaries aren't walls. They're bridges with clear gates. They tell others how to reach you without trampling your peace. And the truth is, boundaries don't ruin relationships. They reveal which ones are strong enough to handle honesty. After I settled into my new place, Mom visited often. She'd bring over homemade soup or extra groceries, and each time she'd knock before coming in, even though I told her she didn't have to. "Old habits," she'd say with a smile. Sometimes we'd sit on my little balcony just talking. No arguments, no lists, no rules. She'd ask about work, about the job I eventually landed full-time, and about my plans. One evening, she admitted, "You know, I'm kind of proud of that invoice now." I laughed. "Oh, really? That's not what you said when you first saw it." "I know," she said, laughing too, "but it made me think. You handled it like an adult, not by yelling or sulking, but by showing me how things looked from your side. I didn't like it, but I needed it. And that's when it really clicked for me. Sometimes the most powerful form of standing up for yourself isn't loud, it's consistent, calm, and backed by facts. That's what the receipts were about. Not revenge, not payback, just quiet truth. I think a lot of families, especially when you're dealing with grown kids moving back home, fall into this tricky space between love and logistics. Parents still see you as their child, and you're trying to prove you're an adult. That tension can turn even small things, like laundry detergent or thermostat settings, into battles about independence. But the real lesson for me was this: independence isn't about leaving, it's about living with self-respect, no matter where you are. That day, when I replaced the old guest rules sheet with our new family agreement, I didn't just change paper on a fridge. I changed the story we were living. Mom stopped treating me like a temporary burden, and I stopped acting like a resentful teenager. We both grew up a little, side by side, and now every time I visit home, I still see the faint tape marks where that old rule list used to hang. But in its place is a small photo frame. It holds a snapshot of the three of us, me, Mom, and Carl, laughing at the dinner table. The caption reads, "Not guests, just family." It reminds me that respect can heal almost anything if you're brave enough to start the conversation. So, if you've ever been treated like a guest in your own family, or if you've struggled to balance love with boundaries, I want to ask, where do you draw the line between helping and being taken for granted? Have you ever had to teach someone how to treat you with kindness, not confrontation? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, because every family has its own version of this story. And if you enjoy stories that explore boundaries, fairness, and those small, satisfying wins that come from doing the right thing, make sure to subscribe. Share this story with someone who might need it. And remember, standing up for yourself doesn't have to mean standing alone. Sometimes, it's the start of finally standing together.